Alright, this is the last video of the semester and it just has to cover two main points on your lab upcoming. A lot of it's the same. Your queries and everything will be similar to ones you've already done. So what I'm going to go over in this video is the way to populate the country database and show the persons pre-selected in the update functionality. So in other words, if you have a whole list of the countries and they're from the United States, you want United States to show up automatically in the drop-down window, and then they can change that if needed in the update process. So there are two options we're going to go over to allow you to do that. And then I'm just going to give you a quick overview of radio buttons. You're going to get the information out of your radio buttons the same way you did before, but the HTML on the radio buttons actually needs a little bit of attention to make sure that you get the data that you need. So let's start with the logic of your country list. So you have queried your country. You've also queried your customer to grab which country they are hooked up to. And so I have a similar situation here. What I'm going to do is have a drop-down menu that allows you to select if the student is a freshman, junior, senior, sophomore, whatever. And we're going to pretend like that's all stored in a database. So we've queried our students. We've queried our classifications from the database too. So what I've done after that query is the student that I'm looking for, I have dropped their classification, the word sophomore, into a variable named their class, and I have dropped their code into a code here. And so there are two ways you can have the country pre-selected. You can actually put that at the top of the list. Normally, if you have an order by on your SQL, you would have your countries coming in alphabetically. But if you wanted to move United States to the top of that, what you could do is you can come in and open up your select and then automatically just put that option as the first option in the list. So what this would do is it would grab their class and put it in the first option, and then it would go ahead and go through the rest of the options. So I actually only have the option value here. I'd also need to have the classification printout here. So really what I need is something like this, but I would need to change this to, I have this backwards. I would have their class code, which is what is going to be submitted, and then I would have their class show up right here. So what that does is it prints the first option, and then it starts the loop. So when this loads, if they're from the United States, it'll automatically, if they're sophomores, I've got my examples mixed up. So if they're sophomores, it'll automatically read that from our retrieved SQL, and then it will put in or echo out what I've stored in the variable at that time. So this is the code that will be passed through the value of the option, and this is what actually the word that would show up in their drop-down list. So it would say maybe SO here, but then it would read out the complete word sophomore. So it would go sophomore, and then it would loop through the classifications that I've retrieved. So this drop-down list would actually have sophomore, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. But because this is the first one in the list, it would automatically select it. So that's one way that you can go ahead and force their country to the top of the list to allow them to change it. Now the maybe not the better way, because this is actually fairly efficient and not having to do a whole lot of comparisons, but another way you can do it with the same structure in place is you can put an if statement in right here that actually does the correct HTML to make an option pre-selected. So instead of rewriting something in the beginning, your classifications would come in, you'd loop through them, so you have 4 in this case that you're looping through, and you would say if their class code that I'm getting out of the variable that I stored when I retrieved their record is equal to the class code of the current record in this loop, then go ahead and write out the normal value and use the word selected. And this is how this is what you do in HTML to make something pre-selected. If it's not, if it doesn't match, then you'll go to the else option and then just write out the class code as you normally would in the drop-down lists that we've done on previous labs. So it would loop through again. It would check their class code against the current class code in the loop. If it was selected, or if they matched, then you would have the word selected. And then it would go through until it finished. So if you have 60 countries in a list, you would have an if clause evaluate 60 times through the loop. So some people would say that's a good idea, some people it's a bad idea, but realistically, those are the two ways that you can easily do this. So that's pretty much what you have to do on the update record that you have with the countries. You're going to bring the record in that you're looking for, you're going to bring the countries in, you're going to match up those codes that are shared between the two tables, and you're going to take one of these approaches right here. So that's what you'll do there. Now on the second part of your lab, you have to add a gender field to your database. Be sure and add that to your database through the database software, through the MySQL interface. You don't really want to write the alter table code into your code. First of all, it's going to cause trouble if you run it more than once, because the second time you try to run it, it'll try to alter the table and that field will already be there. Second of all, you very rarely would want to put code into your PHP script that would be available out on the web for people to look at, because that could unknowingly open up some security errors. So in this lab, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and go right into the database itself, add the gender table, and pretend like it existed the whole time. And what you'll do then is on your form, you'll have some radio buttons. And radio buttons are just another input type in HTML. They have a little bit of a special twist to them that also allows you to get your data out of it like you did with your filter that you've done 100 times before in this class. So the key to putting your radio buttons onto the page, this is my set of 4 radio buttons here, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It's an input type of radio. It's very important that you have all of the buttons that are going to be in this group have the same name. And so when the user selects junior, the name classification will pass the value JR onto the filter input that you're going to use after this form is submitted. So your classification here is the name of this group. This is also what controls the ability to only select one thing. If you have 4 radio buttons on a page and they all have different names, then you can actually select all 4 radio buttons at one time. But in this case, if they all have the same names, if I click sophomore after having selected freshman, it'll deselect freshman and change it to sophomore, to where you can only select one thing at a time. So this is what you'll receive your value through on your next page. There, my cat just did some typing for you. So let me go ahead and correct that. He is not the best coder, I'm guessing. Let's see, equals FR. Now I'm really messed up. FR. And close that. So, all right, now post-cat, we're ready to go again. So you'll have your name, classification, you'll send a value of FR, and then the user will see the word freshman, and this BR just puts them on a separate line. So this is the value that you'll actually receive. This is what will get stored in your database when you do your update or your insert record later. And that's pretty much it. You have to mess around with some more date formats on the last part of the lab. Just a reminder, this is the last required lab. There is a lab 7 that we were originally going to do, but because we had to change the timeline a little bit and give you guys some time to catch up, I went ahead and made that one optional because it is optional. There's not going to be a whole lot of help added. You're going to have to work on that one on your own. You can still send it to me and ask questions, but there won't be prepared labs. You pretty much just need to work through that chapter in the textbook. So that's all I have on this one. If you have questions for this lab, just let me know.